Not only am I estranged from my parents, but I'm also estranged from all three of my siblings, as are they estranged with each other due to my parents' divorce. And my three siblings also have varying degrees of estrangement from our parents as well. So this is going to be a long one, but it's something that I need to talk about. So let's get right into it. My brother is the oldest of us four siblings. He was about 9 or 10 years old when our mother had a schizophrenic break, divorced our father, and basically upended our entire lives and all that good stuff I talked about earlier on this channel. So he was in what is considered to be an age where you have developed your identity, but if your parents divorce when you're like 8 to like 12 years old, then it takes whatever identity you have formed in your like safe nucleus of your nuclear family, and then it destroys it. It throws it out the window, and that really negatively affects children in their like psychological development. It really negatively affects children. So he was just completely torn apart by our parents' divorce and the sudden schizophrenic break that our mother had, because he remembers both of our parents very, very well before her schizophrenic break. Now, that was not something he ever got over. He was very upset with the situation. He did not fully understand that our mother was a schizophrenic and that she had a schizophrenic break. He didn't understand her mental illness at all. He just saw that our mother was tearing apart our family and alienating our father and accusing him of things that he didn't do. As I've said before, I've seen the evidence from CPS that he did not do some of the things that she said he did. So my brother, not having had that evidence at the time and not understanding that our mother was evil now, did not understand why she was attacking our father, calling the cops on him, accusing him of doing things he had not done. And in a child's brain, who is, like I said, developmental years, 10, 11 years old, he did not understand that. He didn't process it well, and it broke him. It broke him inside. And for a while, he did try to fight our mother. He tried to sometimes physically defend himself, because she would attack you. So he would physically defend himself. He would try and get along with her, because he never viewed her as evil, so he would still get along with her, and he still tried to make the peace with her, and he still saw her as the mother that she was before her schizophrenic break, because in his mind she didn't have a schizophrenic break. He didn't understand that. And so when we were he was in middle school, I was not quite in elementary school yet. I was still very young. And when he was in middle school, he called in a bomb threat to the school. That was his like acting out, because he didn't understand the world around him. He just understood that everything was difficult now, and he was getting bullied in school. After years of having had friends and having been a Boy Scout, he was now getting bullied in school. And so he called in a bomb threat, and he got in trouble for that, and we were all forced to go to therapy from like the time our mother got divorced on, because of the CPS and all that. And at that time, after the bomb threat, his family therapist like called me in, and I had to, talk to them about my brother, and I'm like, no, he's a jerk to me. He's an asshole to me. I don't get along with him at all. I could see him calling in a threat like that. And I do wonder if maybe that had an influence on anything, or maybe not, because nobody ever really listened to me. But I do remember that was around the time when my relationship with my brother started to rift. It was about the time when he was in middle school, and I was like starting to go to like preschool and all that. And then when I was a little bit older, he attacked our mother, and I was upstairs and I like saw it happen, and then my oldest sister brought me and my younger sister downstairs. We called the cops on him, and he was institutionalized. He was arrested. He was put in juvenile detention. My mother took me to go visit him in juvenile detention, and they tried to explain to me that he had Asperger's. But then when they explained the symptoms to me, it really did not sound like he qualified for those symptoms. Like there was something specifically they were trying to say he wouldn't understand sarcasm, he wouldn't understand humor. And I was like, no, he's the most sarcastic individual I've ever met, and he really does have a sense of humor, and he makes a joke out of everything. Like, I don't quite understand why you're saying he has this disease based on a symptom that I don't see in him. So that was a little confusing to me as a child, because I didn't have a very good grasp of anything psychological at that point. I didn't understand mental illness, psychological illnesses. I was young enough I didn't even understand that our mother was a schizophrenic either. Like, most of us did not fully comprehend it at that time. And the only one who did was our oldest sister. And so they heavily medicated him, and they basically stunted his developmental growth after that. They took him out of school, they put him in special ed programs, they told him he wasn't going to have friends, so he stopped having friends. They took him out of Boy Scouts. They basically told him that he would never drive, he would never have a girlfriend, he would never work. And so he didn't. He ended up, after graduating high school, he tried to go to college, and he got lost trying to navigate the bus systems like one day, and then dropped out. He tried to have a job, but then he insulted the owner's poodle, and they were like, oh, well, he can never have a job because he got fired for insulting the owner's poodle. And it was like they never pushed him to try harder. And that's exactly where our mother wanted him to be. She wanted him to be a child forever and to never leave her, like, dome, her wing, whatever you want to call it. She never wanted him to leave her. So she forced him into that. She allowed him to just rot on the couch and play video games all day. She allowed him to eat terrible food. She would praise him for basically being a sloth, and then she would punish the rest of us for doing the same thing. And so she treated him very, very differently, because once she started medicating him after he was arrested, he gave in. He stopped fighting back, and that's what she wanted. She wanted to be able to control him. Now, the problem with that is I really hated it. I really thought it was unfair that she treated him so much better than the rest of us, and I really didn't like him. So when we were younger, I got along with him a lot better. We watched similar TV shows, we played games together, but then after she had him arrested and medicated, he stopped being nice to me, and he started picking on me and calling me names and causing fights with me and beating me up, and he wouldn't play games fair with me anymore. And so our relationship really started to have a rift after she had him arrested and medicated. And then when our mother gave custody of me to our father when I was in high school, I never really saw him again. There were a few times that my father wanted to go visit him, so we'd all get together and go out to dinner, but he would just show up and start insulting me. And I was in high school by this point, and he was already calling me the names that he had called me when I was like 5 years old, 10 years old. And so I just didn't like it. I couldn't handle it, and I just didn't want any relationship with him either at that point. And I don't think he wanted a relationship with me. He never tried to have a relationship with me after that. So that's basically the sum of it. My brother's the oldest one of us 4 kids. He was the first one that really estranged himself from the rest of us 3 girls, because we all moved out of our mother's house, and he stayed and he sided with her. And it's really a tragic ending for him. It's really sad what happened to him and that he gave in. But the biggest thing is, he, at like 30 years old, last time we saw each other, was trying to say something about oh, I just wish you and Mom would just bury the hatchet to our father. Like, he just was not in the headspace where he didn't understand it's gone too far for our parents to just bury the hatchet. And he's just stuck basically at around 14 years old when our mother had him arrested. He hasn't aged since then, he hasn't matured since then, he hasn't grown up, and he really hasn't tried to have a relationship with any of us 3 sisters, so he doesn't have a relationship with any of his siblings anymore. My oldest sister was about 8 or 9 years old when our mother had her schizophrenic break, and she is the only one of us siblings who fully understood the difference between our mother before and after the schizophrenic break. The way she described it to me as a child when I first was learning about my mother is mentally ill, not just pure evil. There is a reason behind it. She explained to me there was one morning our mother dropped her and my brother off at the bus stop, and the woman who picked them up from the bus stop later that day was not the same person. It was like the alien from Men in Black had come down, crawled inside her body, and was the one picking them up from the bus stop. And at the time, Men in Black was a really popular movie, so for a child, that was like the way she could best describe it to me. But I totally get it, because everything I've ever heard about her mother is she was a very different person before her schizophrenic break. And I've heard that from adults, from other people in our family, my other sister as well. And to have your mother become a schizophrenic and to have your entire life destroyed and changed really can mess with your identity as a human being and as a child. And she was smart enough to understand what was going on at the time and understand that our mother had become mentally ill. So when my other sister and I got old enough, she told us what had happened, and she helped us understand it better. But she also raised us, because I was only 1.5 years old when our mother had a schizophrenic break. I needed someone to take care of me because I was a baby. I couldn't take care of myself. So my sister really stepped in and helped raise me. And so we had probably the strongest relationship between me and my oldest sister out of all of our sibling relationships growing up after the divorce. Before the divorce, it was my sister and my brother. But after the divorce, they started to become estranged as well, because my brother gave in to our mother and my sister tried to fight it longer than he did. And it got to the point where our mother really went after my oldest sister. And so she just shut down. Like, psychologically, she shut down. She couldn't handle the world. And she started breaking out in hives, which can be a stress response, but she was like covered, like head to toe, covered in hives. She had them on her face, her arms, her palms, her neck, her legs, everywhere. And she stopped going to school. She didn't want to go to school anymore, just like how my brother had called it a bomb threat. He didn't want to go to school either. She just cold turkey stopped going to school. Now, if you've ever read the Twilight Saga or watched the movies, you would know that Bella Swan in the state of Washington skipped a lot of school. And that is not realistic, because in the state of Washington, where we grew up, there is the Becca Bill, which basically says if you miss more than a certain amount of time going to school, it's not that long, it's only like a few weeks. If you miss a certain number of days of school, you will be arrested and taken to juvenile detention. Now, that did not happen to Bella Swan in the Twilight series, but it did happen to my sister. So she was taken to a psychiatric facility. She was institutionalized. And she, I think, was at 3 or 4 over the course of her stay. But essentially what happened is she said she hated our mother and wanted to go live with our father, and for whatever reason they didn't want to let her do that. So instead they're like, oh, you're gonna be in this psychiatric institution. And then finally the last facility she was at, she told them, I don't want to be around her mother, and they were like, that's cool, we have a spot for you at this facility, you can stay. So she ended up staying in a psychiatric facility for about 6 months, and we did go up to visit her. We brought the birds out in their little cages, and we brought her stuff, and it was really interesting to be able to see the inside of a psychiatric facility and to be able to see the people there and to learn about different people inside. Like, that was, for me, a huge learning experience, going to visit my sister in the psychiatric facility. I actually really, really liked visiting her there. And she had a good experience at that facility, but not so much at some of the other ones. And in general, she did not prefer the psychiatric facility. She just preferred being there than living with our mother, because our mother was so bad. So after she got out of the psychiatric facility, she basically, that facility shut down. They didn't have enough funding, and so they sent everybody home. Since my sister didn't really need to be there, they sent her home rather than a different facility. So when she came home, she just did not want to live there. She didn't want to live with our mother, and I don't blame her, because I didn't either. And so she ran away to live with our father. Now, in the state of Oregon, if you're 17 and you're with a biological parent, you're not considered a runaway. So she went and lived with our father. When I was probably about 4th, 5th grade at this point. I wasn't quite in middle school, or maybe I was like 6th grade in middle school. But I was still pretty young at the time when my sister left and went to move in with our father. And then afterwards, she would call on the phone, and she would talk to me and our middle sister, and she would still try and have a relationship with us. And every once in a while she would talk to our brother, but he really didn't want to talk to her. And so their relationship started to drift apart at that point, and even more than it already had. And then when I was in high school, I told my sister I really can't live with our mother anymore. I was just about around the same age as her as when she went into the psychiatric facility. And so she came and got me, and she brought me down to Oregon, and I was considered a runaway. I was an at-risk youth and blah, blah. But she kept fighting, and he kept fighting, and he did eventually get custody of me when I was in high school. So, come here, you little fucker. So I did move in with her and my father when I was in high school, and that was probably the best relationship I had with her. It was like the first year that I moved in with them. And then afterwards, my other sister moved in with us. It took like a year. It's a bunch of moving around and all that. So I moved in with our sister and our dad when I was a sophomore in high school. And then the next year, our other sister, after she turned 18, she came down and lived with us as well. So for a few years, it was my oldest sister, our middle sister, and our dad, and then me all living in the house while my brother still lived with our mother up in Washington. He never moved out of our house. He still lives with her today. The only time he moved out was when they sold the house and moved down the block. So we had a pretty good relationship for about a year or two when we were all three living in the same house again. And we did a lot of fun things. We went to the Renaissance Fair. We volunteered at the Renaissance Fair together. We were part of the ECS, Empire of Chivalry and Steel. And we also, every weekend, would go and play D&D with my sister's best friend and her husband. He was the dungeon master. Kojo, stop it. Dude. Oh my God, you. And she would always bring her boyfriend with us. Now, they met when I was in high school. Like, they were together like 2 or 3 years. And I was still underage at the time. And she would bring him along to Dungeons and Dragons. She brought him to the Renaissance Fair. Like, anytime we did something as a group, he was always there too. And I did not like him. I personally thought he was a complete idiot, and I didn't think he treated my sister well. And I let her know that, and I was very vocal about it, and he knew I didn't like him. But he's also the reason why my sister and I have completely been estranged, and why there's really not much fixing that relationship. So after my sister moved out, my other sister moved out, and then I moved out. It was like a, this year, that year thing. And after I moved out, when I was 18 years old, my sister was still with our dad in Oregon. She lived on her own at the time, but she did move back and forth, and she still really took his side. And after I moved out, I was told that about a year before I moved out, so when I was still like 17-ish, my sister's boyfriend had told our grandmother at a family get-together that he was obsessed with me. And I had no idea until like after I moved out. So I was left alone in a room with this guy at some point as a minor. I was like in his car. He would pick me up from school sometimes. Like, it was really unsettling for me to find out later that her boyfriend had been obsessed with me the entire time they were together. And I'm sure it was very upsetting for her. I'm not gonna be like uncompassionate, whatever you want to call it. Like, I understand that was probably hard for her to understand and to comprehend. But I really don't understand why she didn't just break up with him at that point, and why she continued to allow him to be around me, and why our father continued to allow him to be around me. Because our grandmother knew about this, and she told everybody. She told everyone at the family reunion that he had said this, and that he said he was obsessed with me. So everybody in our family knew this, except me. Even my other sister knew, and she never told me. Like, everybody kept this as a secret from me, that there was some guy who was creeping on me while I was a minor. Nobody told me, and everybody allowed it to continue to happen. So I was upset about that. She was upset about that. She didn't completely cut off contact with me at that point. After I left our dad's house and I found everything out, she said some like nasty stuff to us. She left me some nasty messages, and then for a few years it was like we would sometimes tell each other like Merry Christmas, things like that, but we didn't really talk. And then a few years ago, I found out from our grandmother that she had completely cut off contact with everybody in the family, and that nobody knew where she was. She changed her phone number, and I personally hope she got sober, because she lived with our dad, she took his side, she got into a habit of drinking with him, and I believe she developed some form of alcoholism. I don't know how bad it got, but I do think she had some sort of alcoholism. So I personally hope she got sober and that she's in a better place now, but it's hard to want more of a relationship with her, knowing that she allowed her boyfriend predator to be around me. But also, like, she did take care of me growing up, and she was my favorite sister growing up. I had the most strongest relationship with her growing up. So I would say that's probably been the hardest one for me. But also, like, the way I found everything out was just so terrible. And what are you doing? But that is what it is, and if she wanted to get back in contact with me, if she wanted to apologize for allowing her creepy ass boyfriend to be around me, I would definitely have a conversation with her again. And I would be willing to listen to like her side of the story and why she is upset or whatever. And she's probably the only one of my siblings I'd really be willing to have that kind of conversation with, because she did raise me, she did have a good relationship with me at one point. But at this point in time, I understand why there's no relationship, and I'm okay with it. And my oldest sister and I have been estranged for over 10 years now. Kojo, what are you doing? My middle sister was 3 years old when our mother had her schizophrenic break. So she's both old enough to remember our mother and father before the schizophrenic break, before the divorce, but she was also young enough that she hadn't hit that age yet where children start to build their own identity, that like 7, 8 years old. She wasn't at that mark yet. So our parents' divorce and our mother's mental illness affected her in a very different way than it affected the rest of us, because she had those memories, but they weren't ingrained in her yet. So when our parents first divorced, she was still very on the side of there's something wrong with our mother, but she didn't really understand what it was until she got a little bit older and our other sister was able to tell us what was going on, tell us about the schizophrenia, tell us about mental illness and all that. So when she was about 8 years old, our mother had her so heavily medicated that she was falling asleep in class. She couldn't stay awake. And she was basically medicated to the point as an 8-year-old where she was on a full adult dosage of ADHD medication and antidepressants. Kojow. Get your fucking mouth off that, dude. I fully believe that the medications my sister was put on really negatively affected her developmentally, and I think they have long-term lasting impacts that doctors just don't care about. So she would fall asleep during class. She would have to go in the middle of class to go take medications at the nurse's office. So she got bullied for it. She did not have friends. She got picked on, and she just didn't have a good relationship with other students. And she didn't have, I would say, a great relationship with us siblings either. Like, she was very manipulative and lying and would try and get us all in trouble for various reasons. She would try and do stuff very sneakily and not get in trouble for it. She developed a lot of the passive aggressiveness that's on our mother's side of the family. And she also takes the most after our mother. We do ultimately believe she has become schizophrenic. Like, we think there were warning signs as a child and she just slowly had a development into schizophrenia, differently than our mother, who had a break on a very specific day. Now, since she didn't get along with people well, she didn't get along with me well, even though we were like 18 months apart. We were very close in age. She didn't have good social interactions, but then she was also like asleep for most of the time and really out of it. And she did try to do like some team sports at school. She did color guard, she did swimming, she did tennis, but she never stuck with anything more than about a year. She was very directionless. She didn't know where she wanted to go in life. She didn't know what she wanted to do, and she didn't have any like clear goal. She couldn't stick with a hobby for very long. Like, my other sister and I, we were very creative. We draw, cross stitch, so she would try and do some of that with us, but then she would never finish her projects. She would never finish anything because she couldn't stick with it long enough. She didn't have the attention span or the dedication or whatever you want to call it. And then when it comes to her relationship with me, so we were very close in age. We were only 18 months apart, and we were stuck together a lot of the time. We were stuck together in daycare. We were stuck together at home. And she did not like me, and she wasn't nice to me, and she would try and pick on me. So I was always healthier than her, and even though she was 18 months older than me, I was always the same size as her. So she physically could not pick on me the way she did when we were younger, because I had that growth spurt and was like strong. I was actually stronger than her by the time we got to middle school because I eat as much as I can. I would always finish her portion of food because she wouldn't eat enough. And she didn't eat animal products. She started going vegetarian. She did the vegan thing for a bit. And so I was always healthier, I was stronger, and I was just as big as her. So it got to the point where if she tried to lie and say I did something that I didn't do, she tried to get me in trouble, then I would physically take it out on her because I could. And then there was one point when she tried to headbutt me, and she realized that it hurt her more than it hurt me. And that was when I would say our relationship really broke down, is when she realized she couldn't get at me the way that she used to, the way she wanted to. She couldn't get at me like I was her little sister, because I really wasn't littler than her. And then our mother continued to medicate her, and she got to the point where in high school she tried to act out a little bit by dyeing her hair blue. And then she had one teacher that year, and then the next year after she had cut all the blue hair off, and her teacher didn't remember her from the year before because the only thing that like stood out from her was that blue hair. And so when she got rid of the blue hair, like she was just a part of the woodwork. Like nobody recognized her, nobody knew her, she didn't engage with anybody, she didn't build relationships with people outside of our household, she didn't have a lot of friends. She had a few friends, but her friends are always so weird. There's always something wrong with her friends. They're creepy. They don't understand social cues at all. Like they're very like her, but there's something always wrong with her friends. So when I moved in with our father, and our mother gave custody of me to our father, she had the choice to go with me. She had the choice for our mother to give custody of her to our father as well. But she was in her last year of school, and since she had such a hard time making friends and she was such a nobody, she didn't want to move school districts. So she stayed with our mother for that last year of school. And at that point, like we would call her, like my oldest sister and I would call and talk to her, but we didn't have as much of a relationship with her at the time until she moved down to live with us after she graduated high school. Now, she was way too soft to be able to withstand our father's just incessant like harassment and just yelling and being a tyrant. Like she couldn't handle that. She shut down physically. She couldn't deal with it the way that my older sister and I could, because we would both fight back physically, but also like mentally, emotionally. We would argue a lot, but she wouldn't. She would not argue. She just shut down. And so when like about a year after she moved down, we had got together at a family reunion, and he made an offhand comment like, oh, why don't you go live with your aunt and uncle? Maybe you'll get a job. Maybe you won't be sitting on my couch doing nothing. Because she had done nothing for an entire year. She never applied to any jobs. She didn't do anything. She didn't have friends. She didn't go out and do anything other than when my sister took us both to the Renaissance Fair and we volunteered. That was the only thing she ever did, was when we did something together. And she never had her own ideas of things she wanted to do. She never had her own hobbies. At this point, she was just sitting on the couch doing nothing. And my aunt and uncle were like, well, yeah, we already offered your other sisters to come out here. Like, you are all welcome to come and live with us whenever you want. That's totally cool. So they knew at the time that if they offered my sister a spot, that she would not go back to live with our father. He didn't realize it at the time, but that's what happened. So she left the family reunion, got a plane ticket, left the reunion with my aunt and uncle, and moved in with them. And at that time, I still had a pretty good relationship with her. We talked a lot, talked to my aunt and uncle a lot, And then when I turned 18, she actually bought my cell phone for me. She bought some stuff for me when I moved out with them. Like, she was excited that I was moving out there, and she was preparing for me to move. And then things were better for a few years. So my aunt and uncle really did try to help her. They tried to prop her up. They helped her get into college. They helped get her a job. And by that I mean they applied to jobs for her. They applied to college for her. They got her a car. Like, they did everything for her, but it put her in a position where she had a job, she had college, she had some new friends in that area, and she was like learning to be an adult, as much of an adult as she ever could be, because she's really not an autonomous human being. And then when I moved in, I would sometimes, you know, take her places. Like, I would say, hey, let's go here, let's go there, let's go do stuff. And at a certain point when I moved out is when she started really having problems. So I moved out when I was 20 years old, and she was a few years older than me, and she felt very self-conscious that I had moved out before her, and out of our aunt and uncle's house before her. And she never had a full-time job until she was about 25, 26 years old. And she at one point wanted to go to a college that was a few hours away. And we all told her, that's not a good idea for you. You shouldn't go. But she went anyway. And then when she came home, there was no support from her school to help her apply for tuition, help her apply for school the next semester. So her like support network was just completely gone with that, and she hid it from us. And then my aunt and uncle were like, hey, why aren't you in school right now? The fall semester should have started. And she just like sent them an email that like she didn't have anybody to help her fill stuff out, she didn't know what to do, and so she just didn't do anything. And at that point she had already quit her job because she had gone to work at this other, gone to go to this other school. So my uncle got her a job working at the Jimmy John's that he worked at. Now, a few years later, probably about a year later, she just all of a sudden stopped working and didn't tell anybody. Again, didn't tell anybody that she just stopped working. And we wondered if she had gotten fired, but she didn't really go into it. She didn't say yes or no she got fired, but we thought she might have. And so they got her another job. They got her a job for like a Halloween thing, working at a Halloween store. And at this point, I had my own group of friends. I had been working full-time for a while. I had my own apartment. I had my own car. And I would come over and I would take care of everybody. My aunt and uncle had health issues, so I would come and help take care of them. I would help take care of their dogs and cats. And I'd come help take care of my sister when my aunt and uncle weren't there because she needed an adult to take care of her. And there was a point where my aunt and uncle and I really had a discussion about her mental state. And we realized that she needed to go see a doctor. So we encouraged her to go see some sort of like psychiatrist or whatever. And she was able to get it free because she didn't make much money at all. She wasn't working. And she started an antidepressant. At first it was really good for her. At first it really helped her. And then it stopped working, or she stopped taking it, or maybe at one point she wasn't able to go to her psychiatrist anymore, like they changed. And then she started to come up with different diagnoses for herself. She was convinced that she had autism, which she did not. She was convinced that she had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which she tested negative for. And she was convinced that she had some other disease that she also tested negative for. I forget what it was. But at the same time, she was also diagnosed with POTS and then did not take care of herself in the way that you're supposed to take care of yourself with POTS, because you're supposed to take care of your like diet and exercise lifestyle issues. And then she bought herself a cane, started walking around with a cane, and she bought a walker and started walking around with a walker. And I took her to the zoo at one point, and she sat on this walker and kicked herself around the zoo and like almost kicked herself into people who were in wheelchairs. Like into people that like do definitely have some sort of disability. And it was just really weird and uncomfortable. And I knew growing up that she was always very loud and would say obnoxious things to people and like didn't know how to talk to people, because she did not try to engage with people. She did not try to have friends. And so she was not socialized well. It's not autism, she just wasn't socialized well, and she didn't try to socialize well. But it became even more apparent the older she got how just uncomfortable she was in public and with other people. And then there were different warning signs right around that time. There was like a year or two where it really, the schizophrenia warning signs started coming out and flashing really bad. Things like when my uncle was in the hospital, she was wearing these little short shorts and like her labia was sticking out of them, and it was making the like nurses there very uncomfortable, making us very uncomfortable. And then she got a tattoo after being so deadly afraid of needles her whole life that she would not get a flu shot. If she would scream and have to be held down physically to get a flu shot, she went and got a tattoo. She was trying to get into makeup, like really like a 16-year-old trying to like find their own identity at like 26. She was putting on lipstick in my car while I was driving, and I was like, that looks like shit because I'm driving. You need to wait till I stop driving to put that on. And then she went and got a cat. Now my aunt and uncle they were animal hoarders. They had plenty of cats and dogs. And my sister did not need to bring another cat into this household. And also my aunt did not want her to bring another cat into the household. And so she had this cat in her little basement dwelling, which she did not take care of. She was a hoarder as well. She was not cleanly. She did not take showers. She didn't brush her teeth. She didn't take care of herself in any way. She left all her dirty clothes on a pile mixed in with the clean clothes. And then when she got this cat, she allowed it to pee on the bed and did not wash the bed. She just continued to sleep in it. And we did not want to support her with what she was doing. So my aunt and uncle told her, you have to take the cat back. We don't want this cat. But also, if you don't take the cat, then you have to move out. And so she tried to pawn her cat off on me. And at this point, my boyfriend and I went to go look at this cat, and we didn't like the cat. And so we said no. And so my sister was like, oh, well, can I move in with you with my cat? And I was like, no, I'm not gonna let you move in with me with your slovenliness. Like my apartment is my zone. It's clean. It makes me happy. It's my happy place. I'm not letting you in there with your hoard, and I'm not gonna let you make it a mess. And I don't like your cat. I don't want your cat around me. So my boyfriend and I said, no, we're not taking your cat. And we went and got a different cat. We went and got Cujo, and then we got married, and now we have a house, and life has moved on. But at the time, she was looking at me, and she made comments about how my younger sister has her own place. My younger sister has a 401k. My younger sister has a boyfriend and is probably gonna get married. And then she looked at what she was doing and just really continued to self-destruct at that point. She did ultimately have a social worker help her find a full-time job and got her into her own apartment. And then she really, like, she was weird about it because she moved out of my aunt and uncle's house without telling anybody because she wanted this cat. Like, she wanted to keep the cat. She didn't want to get rid of it. And so she had just moved out, finally told everybody she moved out, and then she did still have a little bit of a relationship with my aunt and uncle and me, but she grew farther apart. And then when COVID hit, my aunt died, and then she really kind of went off the deep end at that point and started getting into just like problems with her roommate and other stuff. She started going down the like trans ideology pipeline, which we think she was heavily influenced by the new psychiatrist she was seeing at the time. And then she did ultimately move back to Seattle, where we grew up. She, as far as I know, doesn't have any contact with our mother, our father, or our brother. We know she doesn't have contact with our oldest sibling because she doesn't talk to anyone. And every once in a while, she and I will talk to each other. She let me know when our grandma died. I let her know when our aunt died, that kind of thing. And it just, she was not a good sister to me. She was really awkward to be around towards the end of our relationship, really. And then she really did not treat people well. She isn't a good sister. Even when we were in the same room with her, she was always sitting on her laptop, just not engaged with society, not engaged with anybody else around her. So it's kind of similar to my brother in that I don't really want a relationship with her at this point, and she doesn't really want a relationship with me at this point. But it's still amicable when we do have to interact, even though we don't interact that much. But I would say she's very similar to my brother in that she was destroyed by our parents. She was not given the resources and the life and the support she needed growing up, and that is very, very clear in how it negatively affected her. And we do unfortunately think she got the schizophrenia from our mother, and that is what it is. And you can't force somebody to take medication to fix something when they don't think they have a problem. Oh, I should probably drink some water. My throat's all crackly. Why don't I talk about myself for a little bit? So I told you why my 3 older siblings don't really talk to me, why they don't really talk to anybody else, but I didn't really go into the details of my interaction with them and my relationship to them as much. So I am the youngest of 4 siblings. I'm the only one who doesn't remember our mother before her schizophrenic break because I was only 18 months old at the time. All of my siblings remember my mother when she was sane, and all of my siblings remember our father before our mother divorced him and destroyed our family. And that has affected me in a very, very different way than it has affected them. And unfortunately, it still contributed to all of us being estranged from each other. My brother took our mother's side of the divorce. My sister, oldest sister, took our father's side in the divorce. And then our middle sister never picked a side. She just kind of went with the majority. And then I was the one who chose to reject both sides. I did not like our mother, I didn't like our father, and then my relationship with my siblings was kind of a casualty in all of it. So unfortunately, because the divorce caused such a rift within our family and everybody picked their own side, none of my siblings even talk to each other anymore, and all of us have been estranged from each other. And then that has affected me in life. It has become fairly lonely. You know, I grew up in a house with 3 siblings. It was a very chaotic house. It was an abusive house. It was a traumatic house to live in. And my siblings and I fought like dogs, and they would always pick on me because I was the youngest. I was the easiest target. And I also would like react. Like I would get very, very angry and I would fly back at them. I would bite, I would claw, I would kick, I would like punch, I would do anything I could. I was like a stray cat. I was scrappy and I would defend myself. And I think part of that is it contributes to why my siblings and I don't talk to anymore, because I didn't really see them as like protectors or caretakers. I saw them as people just like other kids at daycare and school that were trying to attack me, trying to negatively affect me. And I did see them side with our parents, who were not good to me. Our parents were awful to me. And just seeing them take any sort of side with our parents, our brother taking our mother's side, our sister taking our dad's side, I didn't really like that, because then they would gang up on me, with our parents included. And then I was always the odd man out because I was the youngest. I was the most trigger happy. I was the most reactive, and I didn't have anybody in my corner. I didn't have either of our parents in my corner. I didn't have any of my siblings in my corner. I was on my own. And that essentially was a benefit to me. So when I was 18, I lived with my aunt and uncle, but when I was 20 years old, I went and got my own apartment. None of my siblings lived on their own at 20 years old. All of my siblings dropped out of college. I was the only one who never went to college. I went and got a job instead. I was the youngest to have a full-time job and my own apartment out of my siblings. I had the least amount of debt because I never took out student loans. I was the first to get married as well, and I'm the only one who owns a house. Yeah, it's tough. Money's really tight. We are struggling, but I'm the only one who owns a house. So when you compare where I am at in life to where my siblings are at in life, my brother still lives with our mother. He's never gonna have a girlfriend, never gonna have a job, never gonna have a car, never gonna have his own place. My oldest sister was having some alcoholic issues, and now nobody knows where she's at. She's cut off entire contact with our family. And then the middle sister, who we think might have the schizophrenia and is really in a negative self-destructive cycle right now. I'm the only one who's doing anything positive with my life. I'm the only one who is trying to, I guess, make a difference, or trying to get my voice out there, trying to tell our story. Because my sisters always wanted to tell our story. When we were younger, we always thought, well, we could write a book, or we could write a screenplay, write a movie. Like, our story needs to be told. It needs to be out there. People need to understand what can happen when you're raised by mentally ill parents, and what true mental illness actually looks like. And so, in a way, I want to get our story out there for them as well, because they are the casualties of this situation and of this kind of parental abuse. And I do miss my sisters. I don't miss my brother. I never had a good relationship with my brother. I never liked him. We never really got along. The only thing we ever really enjoyed doing was like playing video games when we were little. And then my oldest sister, since she did raise me, like, her name was my first word. The first word I ever tried to say was my sister's name, because she was like my mother. She's the one that raised me. And I had the best relationship with her growing up. And I did really see her as a mother figure and as a protector for a while, until I was in high school. And then she kind of betrayed me. She betrayed me by not telling me that her boyfriend was creeping on me as a minor. Like, it was not cool, and I don't like that she hid that from me. And then instead, she kind of turned on me. She kind of had a nasty relationship with me after that. And then my other sister, she was always in her own little world. She was never nice to me. She was mean to me. I never had a really good relationship with her. I always had a relationship because we were close in age and close in proximity, and we lived together for a while, but we were never really close. And so I'm at a point where I have moved on with my life. I've done something with my life. I'm trying to do something with my life. I'm trying to get ahead in life if I can. And I see my siblings as a casualty, and I feel bad for them. But at the same time, I know it's better for me to not have their negative influences in my life, and I know it's better to not allow them to take me down with them. It's better for me to prop myself up and have positive interactions with the people around me, have good relationships with the people around me. And if that means cutting out my parents, cutting out my sisters, cutting out my brother, cutting out everyone in my life who isn't going to be good to me, that's what I need to do. But it can be lonely at times. For a while, the only person I had contact with was my grandmother. After my Aunt Heidi died, the only one I talked to was my grandmother. And then after my grandmother died, I had really nobody. My sister told me that my grandma had died, but we didn't really have much of a relationship at that point. And then my other aunt came back into the picture. She started messaging me. She started, talking about grandma, and I said, hey, send me one of grandma's quilts to finish. If she had any unfinished quilts, I want to finish them for her. She was always taking care of everybody. She always wanted the best for everyone, for me, and we had bonded about quilting when I was a kid. So I told her, yeah, send me grandma's stuff. And so she started sending me some stuff, grandma's quilts, and we started talking again. And it's been good to have a relationship with my aunt again, because I hadn't really talked to her much for a while after I moved out of my father's house, because she and my other aunt didn't really get along, the one I lived with. So I do have, at this point, one connection left to my family. And that's where I need to be. I need to only have that one connection, because that's a good connection. We've been supportive of each other. We've been talking about good, positive things. And we haven't been blaming, and we haven't been nasty, and there's no toxicity between my aunt and I. So it's good to have her back in my life. And then I have gotten married, and my husband's family is now my family. So that's really important for me to focus on my new family, the family I married into, because it is lonely not to have any contact with your family, and it's hard not to have any support. It's hard to be on your own. And I think about all my siblings are really kind of on their own. Even my brother who lives with our mother, he's on his own in that house. She is not on his side. She is tormenting him. She is medicating him. That's a very lonely existence. And I just don't know what the future looks like. I only see it getting worse for them. And I do feel bad that my siblings are in that position. But I also know it's almost entirely my parents' fault. If you guys are estranged from your own siblings and you have your own situations going on, I'd love to hear about them. If it's your parents' fault, let me know. If it's just the siblings' fault, let me know. If everybody is just awful towards each other, let me know. But there's a lot that goes into family estrangement. There's a lot that goes into sibling estrangement, and it's a complicated story. It's not easy, and there are lasting effects from it. So I hope you guys enjoyed watching this video. Let me know if you have any questions or comments. Leave a like on the video, and I'll see you all next time.